Sorry.
All right. Good Monday morning. How's everyone doing today? Most excellent. One thumb up. You look very fresh, Edward. Very fresh. Everyone have a good weekend? Hopefully. Pretty good. Project 5 is in the past. So should have been an okay weekend. Not quite, right? You still kind of need it. Project 6 is here. Okay. All right. So last week we started really kind of pounding through this WindowBuilder stuff. Okay, and so we're basically going to continue on with that. As you can see, we've learned a good number of controls, or at least kind of had some exposure with them. So let me see if I can scroll over a little bit. Okay. All right. So we've had we've done radio buttons, right? We've done checkboxes. We've done the JText area. We've done a JText field. We've done JButtons, right? Who remembers what we did special with this JText area? We added a JScroll pane to it. Okay, so when I play this, if I add enough text to this, right? So let's just add some stuff in there. It'll actually add some scroll panes on there, which is pretty cool, right? And then I can go out here as well, and it'll add the horizontal scroll bars. Okay, so it's really nice. This is a ton of functionality that we don't have to write. Okay, if you thought Project 5 was hard, let me tell you, adding this functionality to your GUI, it would be very challenging. Okay, it's doing a lot of stuff dynamically resizing, adding those scroll bars and just the graphics and the visuals of it all. Okay, so we should be very thankful for the window. Let's go ahead and give WindowBuilder a round of applause. In fact, we got to be appreciative of what we have. Okay, all right. So today we're gonna look at a few new things. There's, we could just go on and on forever with the different components. So we'll try to hit as many as possible in this upcoming week, and then hopefully by the end of this week you'll have a pretty good feel for this stuff, such that you could kind of feel comfortable kind of playing around with it and learning the ones that we didn't cover. But we've already kind of gone over the main ones, or at least a lot of them. Today I want to kind of hit the JComboBox, okay, and then the JList, okay. So specifically, I want to do more than just because we can put strings in there, and we'll start off by doing that. But I want to be able to show you how to bind actual objects to one of these components, okay? Because it makes life really nice if I can associate an object with a component. But before we do that, let's go ahead and just add some strings in there. Okay, so let's drag this, make it a little bit bigger. All right, so I got my special instructions, and I'm going to resize my scroll pane a little bit. Okay, actually let me leave that there. What I want to do is make it a little bit wider. Okay, so this is a little bit challenging because I'm running out of room, but if I click on my frame, I can kind of drag it out a little bit at a time there. I can also click over here somewhere, let's see, and I should have where I can set the width if I look hard enough. Maybe I'll find it, maybe I won't. Yeah, it's in here somewhere, we can find it. So I'm just going to drag it a little bit at a time. Tell me if you see it while I'm dragging. I guess I could do it in the code too. Let's do that. Set size somewhere. Set bounds, there's one. Okay, so maybe this right here, if we hover over it, tells you width and the height. Okay, so width, let's just make this like 800 or something. Okay, so now when I go to reparse it, it'll draw it much wider. Okay. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to show you actually before I let me go ahead and resize this. But before I start adding new controls, okay, so now we kind of got this half of a page. Okay, so oh, my order button. Oh, got too many outputs. All right, let me see if I can fix this real quick. I have a mouse. Let me use it. All right, something like that. Okay, so typically what you'll find is when you have a program like this, you may have multiple areas that are kind of logically different from one another. Okay, so as you can imagine, on the left side, this is my burrito ordering screen, right? My burrito ordering kind of side of the program. And on the right side, I could have something very obvious like my line of superheroes who wants to order a burrito, right? So maybe my line of customers, we happen to have a superhero class, right? So maybe we'll try to incorporate this later on, okay? But just to kind of show us how we would do this, so typically we want to use what's called a panel. Okay, so if you go up to the very top up here in containers, you'll see there's what's called a panel. You see we've already used one of these containers, this JScroll pane. There's a tabbed pane and a few others. But let's just try this panel for now. Okay, so I'm going to scroll over so I can see. Need a wider monitor. So I'm gonna put this panel out here, and you'll see it. It kind of gives me this drag and drop. Okay, so I'm actually going to kind of drag it out here. Okay, so there's my panel. All right, so panel doesn't really do anything in and of itself, right? So I put it out there. You can see it actually doesn't look like anything. Okay. However, you'll notice it is on the designer. So let me give it a name. I'm going to call it P&L for panel. So panel customers, or maybe something like that. Okay. All right. So now what I can do is essentially I do typically want my panel to kind of show the user something. Okay, I want them to kind of know, hey, the left side of the screen is really some kind of ordering screen, and then the right side is some kind of customer screen. Okay, so what I might do then, and before I continue, the way that I'm doing this isn't necessarily going to be beautiful. Okay, so don't necessarily take all my design tips, because I didn't think about exactly what we were going to do before we started laying things out. Okay, so don't necessarily model all of the way that I'm laying things out, but I want you to particularly notice the components and how I'm kind of using them. Okay, so with the panel, typically you want to actually come over here and look at the normal options, and it has this border on here. Okay, the best border to use that I like to use is the titled border. Okay, so you give it a title and you say something like this: customers. Click OK, and what you'll notice is that it actually adds this little kind of etched side in there. Okay, so this is really nice. This is, how many of you guys have ever kind of seen something like this? Does this look, can you see that even on the screen? It's kind of hard. You can see it a lot better on the computer monitor. But it has like this little etching, you know, it doesn't need to be super pronounced, but it's enough on there that you can kind of see what's going on. And you can notice that over on my right side, my panel is stretching on my bounds. It's not stretching on the bottom, but I could fix that. Okay, so what I probably want to do is border this right here, and then I'm going to drag this guy so it kind of anchors to the order button. Okay, so now the order button is attached to the bottom, and now this panel is going to stretch. Okay, so now we'll kind of have a slightly better looking GUI over here. Okay, all right, so in my customers, I may do something like this. Okay, so I may say, all right, well, I want to have two different types of customers. Okay, and when I'm servicing my customers, I need to know what kind of customer they are. So maybe I have, for instance, people that come into my restaurant, and maybe I have superheroes that come into my restaurant. Okay, Chris, does that upset you? Chris said something under his breath. I don't know what it was. All right, so hey, we got to use the classes we already have, all right? So, all right, so let me go ahead and put a drop down, a combo box over here. Oh, wait, all right, so something I need to make sure you understand is, notice how it kind of is giving me this big red arrow, and it's not really acting like it's going to let me put it wherever I want. This is because of the layout manager that's set for this panel, okay? So just like we had to set a layout manager for our overall content pane, I also have to set one for the panel. And this is nice because this means if I add another panel to my screen, I can actually change the way that I put components in it. Now, we're pretty much, and I would pretty much always recommend using the group layout. So I'm just going to click it and then click in there. So now I have a group layout set for this particular panel. All right, so now let me go ahead and put my combo box out there. Okay. All right, so if I wanted to, I'm just going to go ahead and play this, and you'll see it's going to drop down with no particular options at this point. Okay. If I just wanted to put a simple, like kind of some simple options in there for maybe like a string, what I could essentially do is, if I click on this again, you'll notice on the left side under my properties, it comes up with what's called a model. Okay. So the model is a really great way to initialize combo boxes in particular. You can initialize some other components. But if I click on this, it'll kind of tell me, okay, look, I can pass it in a enum type if I want. You guys thought enums were useless, right? So I could pass it in a enum, and I basically have to look. I don't have any enums in my particular files here. So what I can also do is, if you read down here, each line in the above text field represents a value in the model. Okay, so for instance, the lab, you might have something like this: Dr., Mr., Mrs. Okay, so you notice it kind of fills it out, and I guess I can't click on it there, but once I play it, you'll notice I now have these options. Okay, so I can kind of say which one of these. I can also say, hey, which one of these should be selected by default. Okay, so at this point it says -1, but I can give it like 2, for instance, which should be Mrs. So you can see that now, when I start it up, it's going to select 0, 1, 2 by default. Okay, so this is really nice if you have a whole list of stuff and typically your user is going to be one of those options. You know, maybe you don't want to necessarily put it as the very first option. Maybe you're doing it alphabetically, right? But for some reason, you know that one of these options is going to occur for your users more often than not. So you kind of make that the selected index by default. Okay. Now, as always, I want to have some kind of label over here. So I'm going to go ahead. Let me name this. So ComboBox. I'm just going to call it like ComboBox title for now. Okay. So you may want to come back and then put a label here. Title. Okay, so I have label title and then ComboBox title. Okay, but let's say that I'm using my other example, right? So I just want person or superhero. Okay, and let's see. Now notice I only have 2 things in there and selected index 2. See what happens? Everyone should look. Why did that happen? It tells me, right, selected index 2 out of bounds. Essentially, I only have 2 things in here, and I told it to access index 2, which would be the 3rd element, right? So be careful. I mean, it's obvious it'll come up with the error, but I'm just going to set it. If you do -1, I think that basically just kind of does the default at whatever the very first item is. So -1 or 0 are probably the best options usually, but you can select it to something in particular. Okay. All right, so let's say this is nice, right? It's nice to be able to set these initially. However, what if I want to actually update this as my code is running? Okay. So for instance, let's say that I wanted to add something other than person or superhero, like burrito, right? So how would I do that? Well, I have to take advantage of this fact. So notice how we set the model here. So remember, the model is kind of what allowed us to put the individual items in there. The model down here. So we actually have to grab this model. Okay, so this model has stuff in it. It was created since I put something in here. It created a model. So now what I need to do is make sure, for one, that this is a instance variable. Okay, so now it's an instance variable. All right, so maybe what I want to do is, let me come down to my button handler. Okay, I'm going to kind of get rid of some of this stuff so it's not bothering us. Okay, so now what I want to do is, whenever they click the button, I want to add something to that combo box to give me another option. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply say, all right, let me actually grab that combo box. I think my thing's not suggesting it very nicely for me. So what I'm going to do, come to the top and I'll find it. There it is, combo box title is what I called it. Let's name it. Let's name it something closer to what it is now. So it's really customer type is what it's ultimately going to be. So I'll copy that, and I'm going to change this to label customer type. Okay, and then obviously the text to customer type. Okay, all right, so now we've got our customer type. So if we come into our source, all right, so now down here I should be able to access my ComboBox customer type, and you'll see that I can. Okay, so I can get all kinds of stuff from it, right? I can get the selected item, I can get the selected index. So for instance, let me just show you this first before we start adding stuff. Okay, so let's say I wanted to figure out, hey, what was actually selected? Well, there's a few different ways I can do it. I can either do this. I can say system. Let me see. Let me just kind of display it to us for now. Okay, so let me just display customer type dot get selected index. Okay. So now when I order, it shows me 0, right? Or if I do superhero, it's going to show me 1. Okay. So this will get me the actual number that I'm looking for of the index, right? Where this is 0, this is 1, and so on and so forth if I had more objects in there. Now from that, I can grab the actual text in there, okay? And the way that I do that is I say cb.customer, well, actually, I'd recommend just saying get selected item. Okay, so this get selected item is actually just a string. Okay, so remember now this isn't necessarily connected to this. I mean, they are connected, but they're not. I'm not using any information to use the get selected item. I could use get selected item in isolation of this selected index if I wanted. So what this is going to tell me now is when I order, it's going to display 0, and then the selected item is person. Okay, if I select the other one, selected index is 1, the selected item is superhero. Okay, now the item just so happens to be a string, right? Because I just kind of put some text in there, and that's why it kind of printed out real nicely. Okay, all right. So, however, typically, I want to add things programmatically to my list and to my my combo boxes. So in this case, let's go ahead and give that a try. Okay, so to do this, remember that the way I got the stuff initially in there was by using a model. Okay, I use this model. So what I actually want to do is go get the model. Okay, and then I can add stuff to it. I can take stuff away. So coming back down here, what I now want to do is I simply say, all right, CB customer type, and then I say get model. Okay. So what you'll notice is this returns something called a ComboBox model. So maybe I'll call this customer type Model. Okay. And I actually want, I'm going to use what's called this default ComboBox model. Okay. So I just basically took what it returned, but I added default to it to get a slightly different class. Okay, and it's going to complain a little bit. It's going to say, hey, type mismatch. So I'm just going to cast it. So it's going to add that little cast right there. Okay. All right, so now I have the customer type ComboBox model. Okay. So I can actually start adding stuff here. So I can simply say at this point, customer type model dot add element burrito. All right. Person superhero. I click order, prints my stuff for me. Now I have a burrito in there. Okay. So I can click burrito now and order. Index 2 is selected. Burrito is the selected object. Okay. And then you're going to, obviously I'm going to have multiple burritos every time I click order. Okay. So one note, typically what I do is I make this customer type model an instance variable. Okay, because typically I just want to grab it once and then I want to be able to add stuff to it and take stuff away. Okay, so we could also do something different, right? Unless if I didn't want to add stuff, I can do customer type model dot remove all elements. Oh, you ready for this? So now when I click order, you'll notice that it does just that, right? It removes all the elements. So if I wanted to clear out whatever was in there and then basically refresh it with some new stuff, this is what I would do.
Press order again.
What's that?
Press order again.
You want to press order again? It's just going to do nothing, right? Nothing's selected at that point. Index -1. Okay. I had a really great point I was about to make.
Oh, sorry.
All right, I remembered it. You guys are in luck. Okay, so notice that I was not interfacing directly with the ComboBox. Okay? The only reason I did it was to get this customer type model. So typically what I'm going to say is this is probably something that I'm going to put up here, right? So I'm going to define it here. I don't actually want to get it because I can't get it right. So typically I'm going to define it up here, right? So here I have my components, and here I have my component models. Okay? Okay, so typically what I'm going to do is I define my component model, all right? And then in my init components, this is where I want to grab it. So you'll notice wherever my combo box is defined, so I just want to go and find the code where I actually defined it. It was called CB customer type. Okay, so here it is being defined. So you can see right here what's going on, right? This is the code that WindowBuilder created for me. It just said ComboBox customer type dot set model, and it created this new ComboBox model. Okay, so later, and you notice it's just passing in basically an array, a string array of person and superhero. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm just grabbing that model that it's working with. I'm grabbing it, and then I can change that directly. Okay. So like I said, you can make an instance variable, or if you want, you can always just call get model. Right? You can call get model wherever you want and kind of access it that way. So actually let me leave that off for now, and I'll do this on the second example. So down in my code, I'm just going to do something like this, right? I'm going to say, maybe I will just do get model for here. Okay, so the next question is any questions first on the combo box? Questions on the combo box? Okay, so basically the main the main things of the combo box is the get selected index and the get selected item. Okay. As long as I'm just putting strings in there, that get selected item is going to basically be a string, which is why I can just print it in here. Okay. All right. So now let me go ahead and add my JList, which actually has the customers. Okay. So in this case, what I want to do is let me add a label out here first. Okay. So I'm just going to say something like right here. I'm going to say customers. Okay. So label customers. And then I'm actually going to, what do I probably want to do with my list before I put a list down there? In case the list gets too big? Scroll panes. Yeah, it's always a good idea to, I would just go ahead and put them out there. Okay, even though you don't have to, I would go ahead and just put them out there before you do anything else. Okay, so I'm going to put my scroll pane out here, and I'll just kind of drag it close to the corner. All right, I'll just go ahead and have it resized. Okay, so now I have that. I'm going to call it SCR. Is that what I called it up here? Yeah, SCR special instructions. So this one I'll call SCR customers. Okay, and then inside of my scroll pane, I am going to put a JList. Okay, so again, remember, put it in it's what's called the viewport. You can see the tooltip that's coming up. All right, so now I have this list. I'm going to call it LST customers. Okay, so it's always a good idea to, we got an error. Okay, what do we do wrong? Unresolved compilation problems. Well, that's not very nice. I think it didn't change the name properly. All right, I'm going to undo. Notice this. Undo. Okay, seems to be working. All right, so over here we have, let's just make sure it's missing something, right? So I have SRC customers, but I need to put my JList inside. So I deleted my JList because I had to undo it. So I put that in there, okay? I'm going to change the name. I'm going to try this again, LST customers. And hopefully, okay, good. So now I actually have some stuff in there. All right, so essentially what I can do now is, again, I have this model. Okay, so if I want, I can put some default values in here. I can say, all right, John Doe, Jim, Jimmy Dean, Franny, Mac, I don't know. All right, so, and you'll notice I have these guys in there. I can go ahead and play, and I can select on this. Okay, this is going to work behind the scenes, right? It's going to work the same way as the combo box did, and now I can call the get selected index and get selected object. So just to show you that with strings, again, I'll come down and into my button handler, okay, and I can actually change this from CB customer type to list customers, okay. Let's see, maybe it's a slightly different. Dot get selected value, okay. So instead of get selected, what was it? Instead of get selected item, it's get selected value, okay. I don't know why they changed it, but it's essentially the same thing, right? So if I click Franny Mac, I'm going to get item 2, Franny Mac, okay. If I select a different one, I'm going to get item 1, Jimmy Dean. Okay. All right, so let me take, before we go on to something a little bit more complex, let me just give you like 2 minutes to kind of catch up if you're kind of doing some coding and play with some stuff, chat with a partner, make sure that if there's any questions you have, talk about those for a second, and then we'll keep going in about 2 minutes.
I just exit flips one of those and then I just rerun it. And then it works. And then it has an error again and I just exit again. I don't know what else to do. Because I can get an error all the time. Yeah.
It says exception during the live nature. And it does that to me put it outside. Yeah, that's what it was. Not inside. Yeah. Did you try? Because you exited after 1 second. Like obviously, like you haven't had this open since we last did it.
No.
No, yeah, okay. Because Sarah said she just exited out. Error because her mine was working either.
Exactly.
That's your review. The error?
Following like this. Yeah, absolutely, Professor. Yeah.
All right, does anyone have any specific questions? Do you have any specific questions about kind of this basic binding of strings to arrays? No. Okay. All right, so what I want to do now is show you how to bind objects to, specifically we'll do it with JList, but in theory, you can do the same thing for ComboBox. You just, like all this stuff, you just kind of have to change the name, right? From list to ComboBox, or maybe there's slight variations like you saw, item versus value. But it's essentially all the same because all of these classes and components inherit from the same kind of generic component. Okay? So what I want to show you is something that you'll need to use for your project 6. And something that's really useful in GUI design in general is, all right, let's say I have a list of objects. I want to bind a certain object to, my list. Okay? So what does that mean? And how does it work? Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to start pulling in some other code. All right, so we've been just working so far. If we look at our Solution Explorer over here, I have our window builder. We have views. We just have our one view, right? And then we have in resources we have our one icon. We have nothing in common. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go and grab some of our old code. Okay, so so I'll grab our old code, and so I had this, remember we had this generic superhero actions, persons, social security number, superhero. Okay, so this is from chapter 10 when we were learning about inheritance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all of this code, okay, and I'm going to go into, this is my folder here, Windows Builder, source, Window Builder, and then I'm going to go into the common directory. Okay, so remember because I created the different packages, it created this common directory. I'm just going to paste this code in there. Okay, and that's it for now. Okay, so now when I come back over here, you'll see if I right-click, refresh, my code's now going to be in there. I have errors. I hope this code works. Okay, so it's in the wrong package. Should be in similar to this one, WindowBuilder.views, except it's going to be WindowBuilder.common. Okay, so I might need to kind of update the top of all these files, so I'll just do that real quickly to update it to the package that it's actually in. Okay, so now I have all this code without errors, which is great. So I'm going to kind of collapse the common. I'm going to get rid of these files because these files work great. I don't want to mess with them. I just want to use them. Okay, so I'm just using some external class, whether I created it or someone else created it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my chapter 10, and I'm going to find my client where I actually created instances. So if you remember, we had our Lex Luthor client, and right here, remember, we had Lex's line of doom. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy Lex's line of doom as just a way to kind of get some dummy information into my program. Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back, and on my model, I just want to get rid of this stuff. Okay. I don't actually want this in there. Typically, sometimes you may initialize it with some string values. Sometimes you may not. If I want to actually attach objects to there. Okay. So you can see now it's empty. Okay. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come to the top, and where I was working with my component models, okay, I'm going to create a new model, and it's going to be of the type DefaultListModel, I think. Default. And then I'm going to call this is a model for I think it might just default list model. So what I'm going to do is this is a list of customers. So I'm just going to say like something like this. So customer list. You can call it customer model, whatever you want. But I would just recommend keeping some consistency. And then I'm just going to create a new one. Okay. So actually, I'm not going to do that right. Yeah, I'll do it right here. Actually, that's fine. Because I'm never going to create a new one again once I do it. Okay, so I will have to import this. So once I do it, default list model, I'll import it. Okay, so now I have customer list. I basically have this kind of empty customer list. Okay, and just like we saw, so remember how when we were using the combo box, I went and got the model, right? I got the model from the combo box, and then I could add stuff to it. And that model was synced up to the actual component. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to create the model first, and I'm going to sync the model with the component, so that from now on I can just add stuff to this list, and it will update that actual component for me. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down into my init components. Okay, and I'm going to find. Let's see. Here's my list. Let me make sure it's public. Or that it's a instance variable. It's not showing up, but I think it is. Okay, so here it is. List customers. And I basically want to put the customer list in it. Okay. So what I want to do, and there's a number of ways to do this, but I basically want to find where this component was initialized. So I'm just going to search for the name of it. Okay, so search for list customers. Here it is. Okay. So if I want, I can actually assign a particular model to it. Okay, so you see it's kind of doing some junk right now. This is actually garbage code at this point. Okay, this is code that was created when I initialized the model earlier, but when I removed stuff, it left the code behind. But you can see there's no values in it, right? If I actually put a value in there, right? If I actually put a value in there, you would see that stuff come up. Okay, so this is actually junk code, so I'm actually going to get rid of it. You see everything that has this set model. Okay, all I really need to do is pass in my customer list. Okay, if I pass this in, it'll create this new component, this new list component, and it will sync it up to whatever's in customer list. Okay, so now for the rest of the time, as long as I update customer list, my visual display will update as well. Okay. Alternatively, if that's not as easy to remember, which is not too bad, right? But if that's not as easy, you can always just say list customers dot set model, and then pass in the model as well. Okay. Now it's expecting a kind of a more generic model, so you'd have to cast it. But I think this is the cleanest way to do it. Wait, what'd I do? Oh no, my problem was I had the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. So you can do that as well. If you want to just call set model and then pass in your default list model, you can do that. Okay. But now what I'll show you is we're basically at the same place where I can say, all right, let's say every time I click on the button, what I'm going to do now is I'll say customer list dot add element, okay, and then test. Okay, so every time I click, it's going to add one more element to it. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about doing this with an actual component. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to come back up to my code where I'm actually initializing components. Okay, and let's go down to where we actually had the list. Can't find it, so I'm just going to search LST. Okay, there it is. So it's all the way at the bottom, right? So you might want to, like I said, the designer is going to kind of add this code for you automatically. Sometimes it's going to do what you would prefer, sometimes it's not, right? You know, my preference would be to have all of this kind of normal looking code that I might actually change before all of this really ugly code, right? So sometimes you might just decide to kind of come and move it around a little bit, because I just want the ugly code all together. Ugly code with ugly code, pretty code with pretty code. Okay. Make sure when you're moving it around, you might cause some dependency issues, right? So what just happened? I basically, okay, see what I did? I moved something up here that was defined down here. Okay, so you do have to be careful. So for now, I'm actually going to leave this stuff where it was, because I don't want to spend too much time rearranging code right now. Okay, but here's back where I was, right? So I have my list customers. I set my customer list model. Okay, now what I want to do is I just want to add my dummy data in here. Okay, so I'm going to say, and I might even do something like this. I might actually create a separate model or a separate method called init customer list, something like that. Okay, so I create this method. I'll go ahead and just create it right there, and essentially it just kind of cleans up my code a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to go back to my Lex Luthor client, because I lost on my clipboard, and I'm going to create some new data. Okay, so in here, I'm going to say, all right, I'm put all this in here. All right, so the main difference is, instead of adding random people to this array list, I'm going to add random people and superheroes to the customer list. Okay. All right, so again, instead of Lex line of doom, what I really want to be doing here is something more along the lines of customer list dot add element, like that. Okay. So easiest way to do this, I'm just going to copy it. Okay. I'm going to select the part that I want to overwrite. Control F. Paste it, and then you can just do replace, right? So find, replace, find, replace. You can do replace all if you want, but sometimes it's best to see what you're actually changing. All right, so person cannot be resolved to a type, so it's having some trouble finding person. Should be in our common. Change to permission, change to object. Yeah. I was hoping it would do it for me. Import WindowBuilder, I think. Dot common star. I guess this has to be the first thing. Sorry. Okay. So basically what I did is I said, hey, go to the WindowBuilder.common folder and import everything in there. Okay, when I put the star, it's kind of like a wild card to say, hey, all those files, let me just give me access to that. Okay, so I have one more tiny issue. Okay, it was importing it from a different project. That was what was going on. Okay, so now I have access, and I'm basically adding all these guys. The person, superheroes. Let's just see what happens. Okay, see what happened? What string? What is that that's printing out there? That's the toString method. Okay. Do you like that?
No.
Simplest question of the semester, right? Do you like that? Answer is no. That's probably not what I would want to display in my customer list, right? But this is nice because we just added objects and it grabbed the toString, which is actually, although it's not what we want, it's still pretty impressive, right? It basically is going to go and find your toString method and at least do that, right? Because every method or every object, every class should have the toString method implemented. So that's at least some string that represents what's in your object. So that's why it kind of picks that by default. Okay. All right. So what I also want to show you is this customer list. It's best to essentially give this a type. Okay. So just like our array list, I can do something like this, and your code will be a little bit happier with you if you do this. Like we saw, it kind of still works, but you'll make your code very happy if you do this. So just do it. You want happy code. Okay. All right. So at this point, I now have my customer list. Okay. Now this part is going to be not very happy. What I'm about to do. Okay. But nevertheless, you don't need to memorize this, but I want you to kind of just look at it and understand this is, okay, so what you're about to see is what a lot of your GUI programming is going to look like, okay? What it's going to look like is you're not going to know how to do something. You're going to go out to Stack Overflow, and you're going to get some ugly code, and you're going to copy and paste it into your program, and then you're going to modify it a little bit, okay? And this is basically what we're going to do right now, okay? So in order to make each one of these cells show something that is a little bit nicer, maybe actually what we wanted to show, okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this code that I have from another project. Okay, and all it is basically a certain type of event handler, okay? But it's not necessarily something it's not a handler based on you clicking on something. It's a handler based on information being loaded into my JList. Okay, so essentially the way it goes is, hey, whenever the event happens that I'm loading information into my JList, how should I render this information? Okay, and we'll finish up with this in just a second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into my event handlers, since this is an event handler, and I'm going to create a new event after my current one. I'm going to do it before it, actually. Doesn't matter. Okay. So basically what needs to happen is you can see I have list class teachers. This is from a different project, like I said. I'm just going to change this to my list customers, right? So again, make sure you can see if I do setCellRenderer, that same method comes up. Okay. And then I just need to kind of import some stuff. So I'm going to import default list. I'm going to... That's the only thing I need to import. I guess component too. Import component. Okay. And then, okay, so then what I want to do is essentially where the specific class is, I want to give it what class I'm dealing with. So I'm not dealing with a teacher. I'm dealing with a person, right? Person. Okay. So my person should have several different methods. Okay, so I can now it's going to show me based on my person class I can do my toString. I can do maybe just my first name, right? So get first name. So now when I hit play, you'll notice that it's just giving me the first name. Okay? So what's really nice is that when I click on this nice kind of simple, it looks like it's just a string. But when I click on this, and then when I say get a selected value, it's not just going to give me a string. It's going to give me the whole object. Okay? And I'll show that to you. We're out of time now, but I'll show that to you on Wednesday. But it's going to give me the whole object. Okay? So we'll pick back up with this on Wednesday. Have a great day. Montreal's in there. Yeah.
What are we working on lab this week?
The same lab from
Lab
last
10?
week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. That one's there.
Library again.